Hoped to cover the immediate area around Charmouth, which was described in 1564 by Thomas Hald, who was a surveyor for Sir William Petre soon after he had purchased both the 432 acres of the village and the adjoining 180 acres of newlands from Queen Elizabeth I. The total rent was £27 per year, not a bad rate of return on the £25 that he had paid for it. There are many other examples locally of low prices being paid for land. Sir Giles Strangways paid Abbotts from the King Henry VIII with 2,000 acres of land for £1,096, and it's still owned by descendants to this day. Sir William Petre was never to live in the village and resided in a huge mansion at Ingatstone in Essex. Charmouth, equivalent to a manor house, would have been the Abbotts house, which in the survey is described as the fairest house, and had previously been where Ralph Tibbs, the bailiff, lived. The property, now known as the Manor House, was in fact the grange for Ford Abbey. The neighbouring estates were to have their manor houses at Catherston, Berne, Abbotts Wootton, Wootton Fitzpaine, Corway and Lyme Regis, and Stanton St Gabriel. I spent considerable time and energy piecing together the story of these manors and their owners in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. This map is the earliest large-scale survey of Dorset and was published by Isaac Taylor in 1765. This sheet is especially useful as it details the manors I'm about to cover in my talk. The same map, this time with the manor houses surrounding Charmouth marked on it. To make it even clearer, I've shown the parish boundaries and the respective manors. I'll quickly go through photos I've taken of each manor as it is today and then cover them in more depth as they would have appeared in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Here I am outside the Abbotts house, which dates back to 1525. It would have been the equivalent of a manor house where the bailiff would have lived. Roger Colwell lived here in 1564. The substantial manor house at Catherston to be seen today was built in 1887 by Colonel Bullen. Parts of the earlier Tudor mansion that John Wadham resided in from 1558 still exist, including the original porch, which was later rebuilt on the east side. He was also lord of the manor of neighbouring Wootton Fitzpaine, which he had bought from the Earl of Arundel. The present manor at Wootton Fitzpaine was built about 1765, incorporating part of the earlier structure. John Wadham, residing at Catherston, would have owned the estate in 1564. The original Colway Manor House still exists in the centre of Lyme Regis. Although it was substantially rebuilt in 1921, it still incorporates the 17th century porch. In 1564, John Williams of Dorsetshire would have owned the estate. Now just the remains of Berne Manor and its outbuildings are to be seen today. Sadly, in 1926, a great storm swept through the area and lightning struck the thatch roof and destroyed most of the manor house. Sir Robert Catlin would have lived here in 1564. Alexander Every was to buy the Abbotts Wootton estate from the Sackvilles in 1583. He died 6 years later and left it to his brother John, whose family built a fine mansion house there, where succeeding generations lived. The house seen today, now known as Lower Abbotts Wootton Manor, is very similar and was rebuilt in the same site in 1900 to face in a different direction. Above the doorway can still be seen the coat of arms of the Every family. Anthony Flower, soon after his marriage in 1591 to Anne Martin, heiress to Nicholas Martin and Margaret Wadham of Athelhampton, bought the manor of Stanton St Gabriel, where they built the manor house which still stands and raised their family. I'll now talk about each manor in depth and we'll begin with Catherston. This is the earliest photo I've found of the previous manor house and dates to 1880. It shows the tower porch that was later rebuilt on the east side of the building that we see today. By the time of the compilation of the Domesday Book in 1086, the landowner was William de Leicester. The current name of the village is thought to have come from derivations of two local families, de Leuston, a corruption of de Leicester, and de Chartres, sometimes corrupted to Catherston. In the mid-13th century, during the reign of Henry III, Richard Payne and his wife Avisha of Catherston bought rights to manorial land from William, son of Walter de Leuston. The Payne family held the manor until 1455, when Jane Payne, heiress, married William Wadham of Merrifield in Somerset. The Wadhams were an influential family. Many were members of Parliament or barristers. The Catherston-Leuston Wadhams were distant relatives of Nicholas and Dorothy Wadham, who founded Wadham College, Oxford, in 1610. It was John Wadham who was to receive a legal education and succeed his father in the recordership of Lyme Regis. He gained some military experience during the 1540s before being appointed as captain of Sandersford Castle near Weymouth in 1550, protecting Portland Harbour. After he inherited the family estates, his interest in the neighbourhood of Bridport and Lyne absorbed most of his attention. The 1564 survey for Charmouth shows him leasing a number of burgages on the street. He was buried in the church of St Candida in Whitchurch Canonicum in an elaborate tomb still to be seen today. Adjoining Charmouth on the east side of the river is a farm called Newlands, which used to be part of Charmouth. In 1576, Sir William Pole sold it to William Wadham of Catherston, and 9 years later it was bought by John Jeffrey. John Jeffrey was related to William Jeffreys, a Southampton notary of Somerset region, who died during his mayoralty in 1572. Nothing is known of Jeffrey before he first appears in Southampton's Assembly books as a tax-paying resident in 1586. Engaged in privateering ventures during the war with Spain, and was accused by one Southampton trader, John Mercer, of hard and unconscionable dealing in recovering debts. After serving as mayor, Jeffrey protested that he was much out of purse in obtaining intelligence and setting forth a ship of 200 tons with a crew of 120 for the Queen's service. Nevertheless, in the same year, 1599, he bought the Catherston estate from William Wadham. He was knighted by King James I during a visit to Southampton in 1603. He died in 1611, and a splendid monument shown here was constructed for him at the Church of St Candida in Whitchurch Canonicum. Nearby is a memorial slab to his son George Jeffrey, who died in 1621. It was his son John who sold it to William Young in 1647. Richard Henville was to later pay Sir John Young £2,600 in 1669 for the manor. The 1841 tithe map of Catherston reveals a total area of 242 acres of land. At the centre is the earlier manor house and church. The impressive manor house at Catherston to be seen today was built in 1887 by Colonel Bullen. Through the medieval period, Wootton Fitzpaine House was owned in succession by the Fitzpaine and Maltravers families. It later came by marriage to the Fitzalan, Earls of Arundel, who possessed the place at the death of Thomas, Earl of Arundel, in 1524. It was his son, William, who sold the property to John Wadham. The Manor of Wootton Fitzpaine in 1844. The Manor of Wootton Fitzpaine in 1895 covered an area of 1,776 acres. The present manor at Wootton Fitzpaine was built about 1765, incorporating part of the earlier structure. The 1564 survey of Charmouth shows that in that year it was owned by John Wadham of Catherston. I now tell the story of Colway Manor, which at the time of the 1564 survey of Charmouth was owned by Henry Williams. The house was entirely rebuilt in 1921, but incorporates the earlier 17th century stone entrance to the former house. This old photo shows how it looked at the end of the 19th century, with its mullioned windows and the original porch. It had once been more extensive, as the 1664 half tax shows it having 14 halves, by far the largest number in Lyme Regis. Roberts wrote in 1826, "The Henley family lived there in great style for many years. The house was large, and the road between two rows of stately trees, which have been long since cut down, led to the church." Hutchins, in his History of Dorset, writes that George Carow conveyed the manor of Colway to Henry Williams of Tyneham in the Isle of Purbeck, who died seized of it in 1585. This manor had been settled by the said Henry Williams on his son and heir John on his marriage with Jane, daughter Sir John Brune. In 1600, Robert Henley purchased from John Williams of Tyneham, Dorset, Esquire, Brune Williams' son, and Elizabeth his wife, the manor and lordship of Colway and the parish of Lyme Regis. The slide shows the family tree and how the Williams were related to a number of important families, including the Martins of Athelhampton Manor. There is a magnificent memorial to the Williams still to be seen at St Mary's Church in Tyneham. Although the Williams family owned the manor of Colway, they were to lease it and lived at their seat at Tyneham, near Wareham in Dorset. The house was built by Henry Williams between 1563 and 1583. It incorporated a medieval hall and its service rooms, which dates to the 14th century. 4 generations of the Williams family occupied the house before the Bond family acquired Tyneham in 1683. Tyneham today is a ghost village abandoned in 1943. Many of the village buildings have fallen into disrepair or have been damaged by shelling. In 1967, most of the manor house, with parts that dated back to the 14th century, was pulled down by the then Ministry of Works. The building's east front was reconstructed at Athelhampton, and its oak-panelled interior can now be seen at Dorchester Museum. This is a view of part of Tyneham Manor today. This is the original document I came across in the Somerset archives relating to the purchase of the Manor of Colway by Robert Henley in 1601 from Brune, grandson of Henry Williams. Robert was to pay just £1,920 for the entire estate, which covered nearly 1,400 acres of Lyme Regis. This was one of many similar properties that he bought during his lifetime. The Henley family still owned the Colway estate in 1828 and commissioned a detailed map and survey book of all they owned. The area covered was still theirs after 200 years. This slide shows the manor house at the bottom of Colway Lane, Lyme Regis. A plan of the manor house and gardens in 1826. A similar plan of the manor house and gardens in 1888. The area today, and the same area from above. Colway Manor was battered in the Civil Wars, and when the family moved to the more secluded retreat of Lee, their mansion at Colway fell into decay. This photograph is of their other house, Lee, near Char in Dorset. It's very similar to Barrington Court and Montacute House with its E-shape. The site was previously part of the Ford Abbey estate until the dissolution of the monastery in 1539, and was later bought by the Henley family, who built the mansion after 1601. The house was sold by the descendants of the Henley family in 1919. Subsequent owners included the local MP George Davis. The house has since been divided into 4 residences. Robert Henley was to pay just £940 for the Lee and Street estates in 1596 from Henry Dewport, which had formerly belonged to Ford Abbey. The original document is shown here with a map showing its position between Wincham and Chard. The family tree from the Henleys begins with George Henry of Taunton, whose son Robert was to found the family fortune with his purchase of a large number of estates in Devon, Somerset and Dorset. The marriage of Sir Robert Henley to Barbara Every in 1674 was to add the extensive Abbotts Wootton estate to their landholdings, which I will now cover. My main resource initially has been John Hutchins' History of Dorset, which was published in 1774 and was thoroughly updated into 4 volumes between 1861 and 1873. They provide a wealth of information and have been invaluable to me. Dorset is very fortunate to have such a comprehensive history compared with other counties. In the first volume of the original edition of 1774, there is a beautiful engraving of a manor house, below which is written, "To the Right Honourable Joseph, Earl of Dorchester, the south front of Abbotts Wootton House, engraved at his expense, is respectively inscribed by his lordship's obliged humble servant, the author, John Hutchins." I was initially confused as I had never heard of the house or its connection with the famous owner of Milton Abbey, who had Capability Brown design the village of Milton Abbas for him in Dorset. After some research, I found that the house shown here still existed, although this one had been demolished in 1900 and a similar one had been built on the site but facing a different direction. It appeared that it had been at the centre of a huge estate of over 8,000 acres stretching from Hawkchurch to the coast, known as Abbotts Wootton, and this had been the manor house for it. Joseph Danvers, later to become the Earl of Dorsetshire, had paid £44,000 for the estate from the Henley family in 1768. I referred to the survey of Charmouth in 1564 a number of times in the first part of the talk. In the second part, I was again fortunate to come across a leather-bound volume simply known as the Great Book of the Abbotts Wootton Estate in Dorset Record Office, which came as a revelation and answered a number of questions about the immediate area around Charmouth that was puzzling me. It's beautifully bound and full of the most detailed plans of all the farms and buildings that constituted the 8,000-acre estate stretching from the coast as far as Hawkchurch that Joseph Danvers, Earl of Dorsetshire, had bought from the Henleys in 1768 for £44,000. The beautiful frontispiece shown here describes it as follows: the distinct plans of the manor and liberty of Abbotts Wootton, Hawkchurch and Morecambe Lake, the whole being a freehold estate of the Right Honourable Lord Milton, situated in Dorsetshire, surveyed, valued and planned in the year 1769 by William Woodward. The Henley family had inherited the larger Abbotts Wootton estate for the marriage of Barbara Every to Sir Robert Henley in 1654 and the purchase of the Manor of Berne in 1620. This unique volume has provided me with a detailed histories of the manors of Berne and Abbotts Wootton, both of which have boundaries onto Charmouth. Returning back to the description of the boundaries and their owners in the 1564 survey, Sir William Peter, there is a reference as follows: this manor is bounded south the sea, east the sea, and lands of the Lord Chief Justice Catlin called Berne. For a long time I could not puzzle out why Sir Robert Catlin, who I knew owned Berne Manor, also had land stretching as far as the eastern boundary of Charmouth. I later found out that his daughter Mary had inherited the estate and married Sir John Spencer. It was their son, Sir Robert Spencer of Althall, who was to sell Berne Manor with 300 acres to Sir George Somers for £600 in 1587. Hutchins refers to the Spencers retaining the manor or lordship and later selling it to William Every of Cottay in 1620. It wasn't until I carefully studied and read the Abbotts Wootton Great Book I could see that the Spencers had held back considerable land before selling it to the Every family, who in time left it to the Henleys before it sold to Lord Milton. There is a page shown in this slide that breaks down the various parts of the Abbotts Wootton estate and their size. The manor of Hawkchurch was 4,644 acres. The manor of Abbotts Wootton was 1,658 acres, and the manor of Berne was 1,205 acres. It would seem that the manor had been much larger and, according to the description, had included Morecambe Lake, Beffersland Farm and Stoneborough Farm. It was indeed the latter whose western boundary went up to that of Charmouth. Therefore, at the time of the survey in 1564, Sir Robert Catlin would have also owned Stoneborough Farm, as well as Berne Manor. This is just one of the many maps in the Great Book and shows some of the farms and properties stretching from the coast to Hawkchurch that Lord Milton bought from the Henleys in 1764. The inset advert to the top is for the sale of the estate by the trustees of the late Sir Robert Henley. The estate map of 1764, when compared with a contemporary map, shows that it covers a substantial area of Hawkchurch and Whitchurch, Connaughton. This slide shows 2 pages from the Abbotts Wootton Great Book, which covers the survey of Stoneborough Farm, which borders Charmouth as it appeared in 1769. The associated fields totaled 141 acres at that time and was part of the Manor of Berne. An enlargement of the earlier map showing Stoneborough Farm and a comparison of the same area in 1888 adjoining Newlands. Stoneborough Farm, high above Charmouth in 1880 before the fields were built upon. This slide shows 2 pages from the Abbotts Wootton Great Book, which cover the survey of Harmden Hill in Morecambe Lake as it appeared in 1769. The associated fields covered 201 acres at that time and was part of the Manor of Berne. Beffesland, which covered 140 acres, originally formed part of Berne Manor in 1764. It's fascinating to compare the 1764 map of the Manor of Abbotts Wootton with the 1900 Ordnance Survey map of the same area. The spectacular landscape gardens surrounding the house had disappeared between the intervening years. This wonderful watercolour from the Great Survey book for Abbotts Wootton shows the magnificent landscape garden that surrounded the mansion house. The ancient Abbey Grange shown here still stands and has been restored and is now holiday let. We are fortunate that the 1886 large-scale Ordnance Survey map of the estate allows us to pinpoint the manor house and outbuildings shown on the early estate map. The line of plans along the bottom of the slide reveal the transformation of the house over the years. The 16th century grange from the monastery of Abbotsbury still exists at Higher Abbotts Wootton Farm, a short distance to the north of Abbotts Wootton Manor House. It had belonged to the Sackvilles, who sold it in 1583 to Alexander Every. Alexander Every purchased the manor of Wootton Fitzpaine for the Sackvilles in 1583 and soon after had the manor house shown here constructed. He died 6 years later and left it to his brother John and his wife Fredeswyde, whose fine stone table tombs still stand at the entrance to the church at Whitchurch, Canonicum. This engraving allows us to visualise how it once looked with the Every coat of arms above the entrance. The house seen today, now known as Lower Abbotts Wootton Manor, is very similar and was rebuilt on the same site in 1900 to face in a different direction. Above the doorway can still be seen the coat of arms to the Every family. There is a splendid group of 3 table tombs to John Every, Fredeswyde, his wife, and son John opposite the entrance to the church. I was very fortunate being able to uncover their inscriptions shown on the slide, which gives their dates and their residing at Abbotts Wootton. I was again lucky to locate another later group of memorials to them in Wootton Glanville's church near Sherborne. These ornately carved marble memorials with their coat of arms to the families tell the story of the marriage of Anne, the heiress to the Williams estate, to John Every Sr., whose son gave both Abbotts Wootton and Wootton Glanvilles to the sons of his sister Barbara Henley. Sir Robert Catlin, who was to own Berne Manor, also had land stretching as far as the eastern boundary of Charmouth. I later found out that his daughter Mary had inherited his estate and married Sir John Spencer. It was their son Sir Robert Spencer of Althorpe who was to sell Berne Manor with 300 acres to Sir George Somers for £600 in 1598. Hutchins refers to the Spencers retaining the manor or lordship and later selling it to William Every of Cote in 1620. According to the later survey carried out by William Woodward for Lord Melton in 1767, the portion of the Berne Manor estate that he bought was 1,200 acres and included Morecambe Lake, Beffesland and Stoneborough Farm. The regional breakdown shown above reveals that the balance of lands for Abbotts Wootton also included the major portion of Hawkchurch and other lands, which totalled 8,000 acres, for which he had paid £44,000. He was one of the wealthiest men in England, with an income between £15,000 and £30,000 a year. In 1752, he acquired the 15,000-acre Milton Abbey estate, where he evicted the inhabitants of the old village and resettled them in a purpose-built village, which is today's Milton Abbey. After his death in 1798 at the age of 80, his estate passed to his daughter Caroline, who was to auction it in a number of lots soon after. I will now move on to Berne Farm. This early map from 1765 shows it laying between the village of Charmouth and Whitchurch Canonicum, an orchard mistakenly written as orchard in Stanton St Gabriel, is also circled, as it seems to have always been linked, and their lands must have been combined at one time. This is a map of the same area today, with the two properties. Berne Manor can now be found by driving down Berne Lane at its junction with the A35, almost as far as Whitchurch Canonicum, where it can be seen in the distance behind a thick hedge. This shows the area covered by the previous lies as it would have appeared in 1764 when it was recorded in Woodsward's survey of Bethesland Farm. A similar view to the previous one taken in 1841. A close-up of Berne Manor in 1887, surrounded by a number of outbuildings, most of which have survived. Berne Manor was photographed in 1904. At that time, the earlier 16th century mullin window east wing could still be seen. The accompanying photo to the previous one reveals the side of the ancient manor house, which was later to be demolished. The drawings by M.S. Hoskins of Berne Manor are taken from the Flor family album compiled by the Reverend John Kestelflower, which is kept at Devon Record Office in Exeter. This slide shows the same house soon after the fire of 1926. It was a front page story in many newspapers at the time. The caption from the Daily Mirror reads, "The roofless remains of Berne Manor Farm near Lyme Regis after it had been struck by lightning. This was followed by a fire which did extensive damage. This interesting building was about 3 centuries old." I will now attempt to tell the remarkable story of both the manor and the important families that were to own it over the centuries. Now just the remains of Berne Manor and its outbuildings are to be seen today. Berne Manor still retains a number of fine ancient farm buildings that can be seen marked out here on this aerial photograph. Hutchins, in his History of Dorset, refers to the Manor of Berne coming to the ownership of the wealthy Bonneville family. This may have been through marriage with a descendant of the Le Berne family, the former owners. The earliest so far found is that for William Bonneville of Chute, near Axminster in Devon, who in 41 is described as having diverse lands and tenements in Le Bernes in the hundred of Whitchurch, Dorset, held by service of 1/8 of a knight's fee. In 1442, it came into the ownership of his son William Bonneville, and in 1472, his wife Elizabeth, Lady Harrington, died seized of it. In 1485, the manor came into the king's hands on the attainder of Thomas Marquis of Dorset for high treason. Later, in 1554, King Henry VIII sold the manor of Berne and Morecambe Lake and lands in Norchard to a descendant of the Bonnevilles, Henry Grey, 3rd Marquis of Dorset, for £518 3 and 4pence. Unfortunately, his daughter was the tragic Lady Jane Grey, and in 1554 he was executed as a result of the attempted place on the throne of England. His estate was later sold to Sir Robert Catlin, Lord Chief Justice. Sir Robert Catlin paid £760 for Berne Manor in 1553. He was living there when his daughter married Sir John Spencer of Althorpe in 1566 in London. In 1574 he died and Berne Manor passed to Sir John Spencer, who leased it to Sir George Somers in 1587. In 1598 his son Sir Robert Spencer sold the freehold to Sir George for £600. He kept the manorial rights and 1,200 acres, which were later bought by the Every family in 1620, who lived nearby at Wootton Abbott. Family tree provides information relating to the marriage of Sir Robert Catlin's daughter to Sir John Spencer in 1566. They were to have one child, Sir Robert Spencer, in 1570. He was to go on and marry Margaret Willoughby, and they had 8 children, from whom Lady Diana Spencer was descended from. The Spencer family have their own chapel at St Mary's Church, Great Brington, near Althorpe, which is full of their ancestors shown in this photograph. Mary Catlin was buried here, and a large plaque relates to her and her father. In 1587, Sir John Spencer leased the farm of Berne to George Somers. No copyholds were included in the conveyance. The deed describing the land as then late in tenure of John Hodder, and when in 1598 Spencer sold the fee simple of the farm to Somers with 300 acres of land, the former retained the manorial rights and 1,200 acres of land. The Spencers held the manors and later sold them to the Everys in 1620. Sir George Somers was the most famous owner of the manor and is known today as the founder of Bermuda, which was initially named after him. There is a magnificent statue of him in the Langmore Gardens in Lyme Regis. On the right is a contemporary painting of him. Somers was born in Broad Street in Lyme Regis, Dorset in April 1554. He was the third surviving son of John and Alice Somers. Very little is known about his early life, but by the time he was in his mid-30s, Somers seems to have been engaged in privateering missions against Spanish shipping in the West Indies. In 1581, Somers married Joan Haywood, the daughter of Philip Haywood, a Lyme Regis farmer. He was 28, she was just 19, but bought ownership of 3 houses of Lyme into the marriage as her dowry. Rental income and his continued commercial success enabled the couple to buy Berne Manor, a 200-acre estate near Whitchurch, Canonicum, and Norchard Manor, another 100-acre farm nearby, for the substantial sum of £600. Somers coordinated Lyme Regis defences as the enormous Spanish Armada approached England's coast depicted here. He sent out 3 ships to join the epic sea battle that raged off the coast from his town and watched with relief as the English side prevailed. Sir George Somers was an English privateer and naval hero, knighted for his achievements and the Admiral of the Virginia Company of London. He achieved renown as part of an expedition led by Sir Amias Preston that plundered Caracas and Santa Ana de Coro in 1595 during the undeclared Anglo-Spanish War. He is remembered today as the founder of the English colony of Bermuda, also known as the Summer Islands. Somers joined Sir Francis Drake's unsuccessful invasion of Portugal in 1589 and took many prizes while cruising in Azorean waters. He used his share of the £8,000 in prize money to purchase Upway House, a 1,160-acre estate, for £1,000 near Weymouth, shown here. In 1590, after both his father and brother died, Somers became head of the family shipping business and the guardian of his 2 nephews, Nicholas and Matthew. An inventory of his Berne Manor estate after his death included well-constructed beds, embroidered Indian coverlets, silk damask cushions, and carpets of all kinds and colours, among them a fair Turkey carpet of great price. There is a detailed list of all his properties at the time of his death shown at the side. The description of the fields detailed for Berne Manor and Orchard correspond with those taken with the tithe maps of 1844. In July 1603, just prior to the coronation of James I, Somers was knighted in the Royal Gardens at Whitehall. The next year he was elected to Parliament from Lyme Regis, and in 1606 he became the town's mayor. In May 1610, Somers finally reached Virginia, but then returned to the Bermudas to gather supplies. He died there in the following November, reportedly of a surfeit of eating of a pig. His body was brought back to England by Matthew Somers, his nephew and heir, and buried at Whitchurch, Canonicum, in July 1611. The position of his tomb in the church is unknown, but a brass plaque shown here records key facts on his life. There is an annual celebration of the life of George Somers in both Lyme Regis and Bermuda every year. Photos from the last one of these are shown here, and also in 2009 when it was held in the grounds of Berne Manor. The statue and plaque relating to Bermuda are shown at the top of the slide. It was the Flower family who were to make the largest mark on the history of the manor when in 1620 they purchased it and nurtured from Matthew Somers. They were to live or lease it for nearly 2 centuries until its sale in 1799. The Flower family originated from a village near Exeter which bore their name. The marriage of Anthony Flower in 1591 to Anne Martin of Athelhampton was to increase their wealth considerably. She was one of 4 daughters from the marriage of Nicholas Martin and Margaret Wadham. Each was given a quarter share in their father's considerable estate, which included 16,000 acres of land and a substantial mansion house that still stands. It wasn't until 1861 that the family finally sold their share. Soon after marriage, the young couple moved to Stanton St Gabriel, where they bought the manor house which still stands, and brought up their family. Anthony Flower and his sons were Roman Catholics. His wife, Anne Martin, held the same faith. In 1608, Mrs Flower had a priest during the enforcement of the laws against them. In 1609, Anne was declared a recusant and her property forfeited. She then went to live in Monmouthshire for a time. This illustration records an episode of a time at Stanton St Gabriel's Manor when she hit a priest who was later discovered, and her attempt to save him. She was later to return back to Berne Manor, and on her death in 1636 was buried at Whitchurch, Caernarfon. I'm finishing on the family tree for the Flower Manor, who owned Berne Manor from 1610 until 1799. I've colour-coded it to show how they were linked through marriage to all the families mentioned in the talk. Their wealth increased over the generations, and the last one shown here, John Flower, married into the wealthy Banks family of Kingston Lacey, was able to buy the substantial mansion of West Stafford that had once belonged to the Goulds, who were related to them. Finishing the talk with this slide, it shows how most of these families would have worshipped at St Candida's Church at Whitchurch, Caernarfon. The parish records are full of references to the members of the family being baptised, married and buried within it. There are also a number of memorials to record their lives, which are shown here, dating back to 1584, with that of John Wadham of Catherston, who was buried there. I do hope you've gained a further insight into the wonderful past of Charmouth and its surrounding villages as they would have appeared in the Elizabethan era. Please go to the Charmouth Local History Society website or my Freshford website if you wish to find out more about any of the manors and owners I have highlighted here. There's also a link to a YouTube video of this talk for those who have missed it or wish to view it again.